So I did want to show everyone what to do if you have more than two buyers or sellers. So I'm just going to go over to command real quick. And this could apply to having three buyers, three sellers, four buyers, four sellers, etc. So anything more than the normal two, I'm going to show you what you should do. And I did not mean to rhyme that, but there you go. So whenever you create your opportunity, you're only going to be able to add in two buyers or two sellers. So if you do have a third buyer or third seller, I'll show you where you can make a note of that. But in command, it's not really going to matter too much for now, just because command contacts don't really have much to do with the names on the contracts in DocuSign. So I'll kind of explain that a little more. But in our opportunities, sorry, I'm just going to create a new opportunity here. I'll just show you a buyer opportunity, and I'm just going to use some random clients that I have in here. You can see the related contact pop up. So say that Sally seller is also on here. So we do have a third person. Maybe it's the daughter, maybe it's just anyone else who needs to be on the contract. So I'm going to leave her off here. Obviously, the opportunity name, you're going to put in the full street address. And I'll leave buyer at the end. So I'm not going to add in the estimated close date. I'm just going to add in the commission since that's required. And I'll go ahead and change this to active and negotiations because we are going to write the contract. So I'm going to hit create. So now we are in our opportunity, and this is what you would do for any opportunity, but just kind of keep in mind that we are missing a buyer up here. So what I would recommend doing is down here in the description box, I'm under the details tab here. So if I scroll down the description box, this little pencil icon to the right-hand side, if you click on that, you can type in a description. So I'm just going to put third buyer is Sally seller. Just to make a little note, then I'm going to save that, and that's going to appear down here now. That's just a little reminder for you over in command. But the most important part is in DocuSign. So if we go over to the documents section and I click start a transaction, for some reason my DocuSign does not like to connect automatically. So let me log out and log back in real quick, and the room will be created. I just have to go to it. So I'm going back to opportunities. I'm just going to go to all opportunities, and it should be at the very bottom. So here we go, 123 Main Street, Tampa, buyer, and back in documents. So now I can go to transaction. So I will log into DocuSign. My username and password is saved. And now we are in our room for this opportunity. So in the details section, again, same as command, you won't be able to enter the information here. Let's hide the seller side. So if I click on edit, I can add in buyer 1, which was John seller. Close that one. Buyer 2 was Mrs. seller. And then you can see it skips to buyer agent, which will be me. And there's no second buyer's agent. Obviously, you want to fill out as much information here as you can. I'm not going to today just because I want to show you specifically how to add the third buyer or third seller. And just remember, this is going to be the same if you are doing a buy side or listing side or even a rental. So then I'm going to click save. So we saved our details section. Again, we only added one buyer and two buyers, sorry, and the buying agent. So now in documents, I can add any document from DocuSign forms. And this is going to be the same whether this is very similar to editing the PDF like I showed you in a different video. and you'll do the same thing as this if you are editing the PDF, but I'm showing you specifically how to edit the DocuSign forms. So I go to the group and buyer residential. And I'm just going to click on, let's see, I'll just show you on this HOA disclosure. That should be easy enough. And add. Obviously, if you are the buyer's agent, you are taking this form from the MLS that hopefully the seller uploaded, and it already has seller signatures, but I will show you what to do in case there's not one. So I'm going to click on this form, and once it loads, you'll see that only the 2 buyers are on there, so we are still missing a third. So you can see there's one here and one here. You can see that these boxes are separate because you can see optional room details buyer 1 name, optional room details buyer 2 name. You can also see that there's only 2 buyer initial spots, but that is okay. So I'm just going to hit save and close because we're only looking at the names and we can't really add our 3rd buyer here. So after I hit save and close, if I go over to envelopes and new envelope, I'll just name this envelope HOA disclosure. And then under room docs, I am selecting the HOA disclosure, add selected. And down here, we need to add our recipients to the envelope. This is the most important part of the video, so please keep this in mind. Add recipient. We are going to start with pre-tagged roles. This document only recognizes 2 buyers, but I'm going to go ahead and select those since we do have 2 buyers. So John Seller and Mrs. Seller. And we are not sending it to seller 1 or seller 2, so we are only looking at our 2 buyers right now. And I'm going to add selected. So now we still need to add Sally Seller. So when I click on add recipient, I'm actually going to click on email address. And then I'm going to add in her name, Sally Seller. I'm just going to add in email addresses here so that it will let me continue. Okay, so they each need to sign, which means we can assign signatures to all of them. And then in the email subject, I like to include the document name. It's up to you. Here is the HOA disclosure for you to view and sign. Easy enough. And I'm going to hit next. This is where I can actually edit the fields that I need to include Sally Seller in there. So once this loads, it's going to default on John Seller because he was buyer 1. But if I click on this drop down, I can see that John Seller, Mrs. Seller, and Sally Seller are here. Each of them have their own color. So you can see here, the yellow is for John Seller's initials, the blue is for Mrs. Seller's initials. I'm just going to check on John's initials and signature, looks good. So now I know I need to add in Sally Seller. So when I click on Sally Seller, you can see all of these fields changed purple, just like the dot next to her name. And now I'm going to add an initial field right over here. But I also need her name up here in this line. So I'm just going to click on name. And it does just say full name, but it will put her name there in the preview. So I added her initial there. Let's see, we need her signature here. So I'm just going to click on date signed and add it below. This obviously isn't the prettiest, but it does get the job done. And then we're going to add another signature field here. And then if I scroll down, that's actually it. So just that signature and her name and the initial. So if I click on recipient preview, I should see her name pop up there. So there we go. We can see Sally Seller's name is here. We can see this is just under her, you can see we're viewing as Sally Seller. So that's where her initial will go, and then her signature there with the date stamp there. So if I click over to John Seller, you can see the initial space will change and it will show his name. So you can see her name is not appearing here, and I will show you how to fix that. So let's close out of this recipient preview and let's click on this full name tab. So that's pretty interesting that it won't let us show that for everyone. So let me show you the difference between this full name field and the text box field. So I highlighted this and I'm going to click delete so I can get rid of that. This is a great learning experience for everyone. And I'm actually going to choose text box here. And then I'm just going to type in her name. I'm going to uncheck that it's a required field. If you do leave it as a required field, that just means that Sally Seller will need to click on it to acknowledge the text in there. So if you do have notes or anything that you include that you do want to make sure that they see, you can leave this as a required field. So what I was looking for before is this collaboration tab. So when I drop down this menu, I'm going to click on Recipients Can Collaborate. And that's all we need to do to make sure that other recipients can see it. So now if we go back to recipient preview and we switch over to John, he can also see Sally Seller's name there. So you do want to make sure that you add a text box. Sorry for that little confusion at the beginning. If you were only sending it to one person, you can always include this name field, but it doesn't let you make that collaborative. So please use the text box if you want the other buyers or signers to see it. So that is how you add those signatures, and then you would just hit send. And that's pretty much it. That's how you add a third buyer or third seller to any, or fourth, to any document or transaction. I hope that helps.